Hey everyone, welcome back to Stack Lessons. Got 20 fresh questions for you today, focused on CAF perspectives, root user security, and sustainability pillar. Read along, hit pause if you need to, and use the 10-second timer to lock in your answer. Let's go. Let us keep moving. Let's look at question 1. Fabricam Corporation's CFO is evaluating a proposal to migrate from an on-premises data center to AWS. Currently, the company purchases servers, storage arrays, and networking hardware every 3 years, requiring significant upfront capital budget approvals. The CFO wants to understand the fundamental financial model shift that a cloud migration represents. Which statement best describes this change? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option D. Variable spending tied to actual usage, not hardware cycles. Moving to AWS converts the traditional capital expenditure model, where companies purchase hardware with large upfront investments that depreciate over time, into an operational expenditure model where costs are variable and tied directly to actual consumption. Fabricam pays only for the compute, storage, and networking it actually uses, eliminating the need for large hardware refresh cycles and reducing the financial risk of over-provisioning. This shift also improves cash flow flexibility since spending scales with business activity rather than being locked into multi-year depreciation schedules. AWS does not eliminate all costs or offer infrastructure at no charge after setup. Resources are billed based on consumption. The cloud model does not create larger fixed costs. Rather, it eliminates fixed costs for most services by converting them to pay-as-you-go expenses. While managed services do reduce operational maintenance burden, that is a separate benefit from the fundamental CapEx to OpEx financial model change. Now, question 2. Map the qualifier to the answer. Conteso Energy has committed to achieving net zero carbon emissions by 2030. The cloud architecture team has been asked to evaluate and reduce the environmental impact of their AWS workloads using a structured design framework. Which AWS Well-Architected framework pillar specifically addresses design principles for minimizing environmental impact and reducing the carbon footprint of cloud workloads? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option D. The newest pillar specifically names environmental impact. The sustainability pillar, added to the AWS Well-Architected framework in December 2021, specifically addresses the environmental impact of running cloud workloads. Its design principles include selecting AWS regions with lower carbon intensity, scaling to actual usage rather than peak to reduce idle resource consumption, using managed services that maximize shared infrastructure efficiency, and continuously optimizing to reduce the per-unit environmental footprint. The cost optimization pillar focuses on eliminating financial waste and reducing spend, which may overlap with sustainability but is not its primary concern. Performance efficiency focuses on optimal use of computing resources to meet performance requirements. Operational excellence focuses on running and monitoring systems effectively and continuously improving processes and procedures. Time for another one. Question 3. The obvious answer may be bait. Litware Incorporated is registering a new AWS account to host a revenue-critical e-commerce platform. Their SRE team has the following support requirements: 24/7 access to AWS Cloud Support engineers via phone, chat, and email, guaranteed human engagement within 30 minutes when the production system is completely down, access to all AWS Trusted Advisor checks, and AI-assisted contextual troubleshooting. A dedicated technical account manager is not required. What is the minimum AWS support plan that meets all of these requirements for a newly created account? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option D. Enterprise adds a TAM the question explicitly rules out. Business Support Plus is the minimum plan that satisfies every stated requirement. It provides 24/7 phone, web, and chat access to cloud support engineers, a guaranteed human engagement time of less than 30 minutes for business-critical system down cases, access to more than 500 AWS Trusted Advisor checks, and real-time AI-powered contextual assistance. A dedicated technical account manager is not included in Business Support Plus, which aligns with the stated requirement to exclude that capability. Basic support covers only account, billing, and service quota questions and does not provide access to cloud support engineers or any technical support SLA. Enterprise support includes all Business Support Plus features and adds a designated technical account manager and up to 15-minute response times for production-critical cases. It exceeds the stated requirements on both dimensions and carries a significantly higher monthly minimum, making it more than necessary for this scenario. AWS Unified Operations provides a fully managed operational model with dedicated technical account managers, domain specialist engineers, and personalized runbooks. It is designed for organizations that want AWS to co-manage their operations end-to-end, and is substantially more costly than the baseline technical support the team is seeking. Business Support Plus has very specific guarantees. Let's break down exactly what you get and what you don't. Imagine your checkout page goes dark at 11 p.m. on Black Friday. You need a real human on the phone, not a docs link. Business Support Plus is the plan built for that moment. It gives you 24/7 phone, chat, and email access to cloud support engineers. If your system is completely down, someone must engage within 30 minutes, guaranteed. You also get all 500+ Trusted Advisor checks, and when you open a case, an AI assistant gives you contextual tips in real time. The one thing it skips is a dedicated technical account manager. That's the punchline. The question says no TAM needed, so enterprise would just be extra cost. Time for another one. Question 4. Do not stop at the first match. A company created a new AWS account in February 2026 and needs technical support for production workloads. The team requires 24/7 access to AWS support engineers and a response time of less than 4 hours when a production system is impaired. What is the minimum AWS support plan that meets these requirements for a new account? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option D. Developer support is gone for accounts created after December 2025. Business Support Plus is the minimum support tier available to new AWS accounts as of December 2025 that provides 24/7 access to cloud support engineers and a less than 4-hour response time for production system impairment cases. Business Support Plus replaced business support for new subscriptions and includes additional AI-powered troubleshooting capabilities. Basic support is free but provides only documentation, white papers, and access to AWS forums without support engineer access or guaranteed response times. Developer support is no longer available for new AWS accounts as of December 2025. It has been discontinued for new subscriptions and will be fully retired on January 1, 2027. Enterprise on-ramp support meets the technical requirements, but includes features such as a pool of technical account managers and concierge support at a significantly higher cost, making it more than the minimum required for this use case. This one's tricky because of a recent change to AWS support plans. Let's walk through it. Imagine your brand new AWS account runs a live checkout. It's 3 a.m. Saturday and something breaks. You need a real engineer, not a forum thread. Think of AWS support as a ladder. Basic is free but gives you zero engineer access. Developer support was next, but AWS cut it for new accounts in December 2025. It's gone. Business Support Plus is where you first clear both bars. Engineers are on call 24/7. And if production goes down, you get a response in under 4 hours. Enterprise on-ramp also qualifies, but it adds dedicated account managers you don't need, and a higher bill. The exam asks for the minimum. That's business support plus. Paying for more than you need isn't minimum either. Ready. Question 5. Reason from the scenario. Northwind Media is designing an event-driven order pipeline. When a customer places an order, 3 downstream services must each receive a complete copy of the same order event. The inventory service decrements stock, the fulfillment service schedules packing, and the notification service emails the customer. Each service operates independently at its own pace. Which AWS messaging service is purpose-built for this publish-subscribe fan-out pattern where every subscriber receives every message? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option B. Fan-out means every subscriber gets its own independent copy. Amazon SNS is a fully managed publish-subscribe messaging service. When a message is published to an SNS topic, it is delivered simultaneously to all subscribers, with each subscriber receiving its own independent copy. This fan-out behavior is exactly what is required when multiple independent services must all receive the same event. Amazon SQS with a single standard queue uses a competing consumers model where each message is delivered to only one consumer. A single shared queue cannot deliver the same order event to all 3 services. AWS Step Functions orchestrates sequential or parallel workflows, but does not distribute copies of a single event to multiple independent consumers. Amazon Kinesis Data Streams supports multiple consumers reading the same data, but it is designed for large-scale continuous streaming scenarios, and requires each consumer to manage its own shard position. It adds unnecessary complexity compared to SNS for a simple 3-service fan-out pattern. First 6 questions: Cloud Economics, the Sustainability Pillar, Updated Support Plan Tiers, SNS fan-out delivery, and how AWS Organizations enables reserved instance sharing across all linked accounts. Ready. Question 6. Find what the distractors miss. Northwind Corp manages 12 separate AWS accounts across different business units. The finance team wants a single consolidated monthly invoice, and requires that reserved instance purchase discounts apply automatically across all accounts. Which 2 actions are necessary to achieve both requirements? Select 2. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are option A and option C. One invoice needs orgs. Resharing needs its own toggle. Enabling AWS Organizations with a management account consolidates all member accounts into a single billing relationship, producing one monthly invoice that covers all linked accounts. This structure also enables reserved instance and savings plans discount sharing, where unused commitment pricing purchased by one account automatically benefits other accounts in the organization. Configuring budgets alerts per account monitors spending against thresholds, but does not consolidate invoices or enable cross-account resharing. Purchasing reserved instances separately in each account prevents cross-account benefit sharing and forfeits the volume pricing advantage of aggregated usage. AWS Config Aggregator collects resource configuration and compliance data across accounts. It is not a billing or pricing tool and does not consolidate invoices. Let us switch gears. Question 7. The wording narrows the answer. A company is structuring its cloud transformation program using the AWS Cloud Adoption Framework, CAF. The Chief Information Security Officer must identify which 2 capabilities belong to the security perspective. Which 2 capabilities should the CISO select? Select 2. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are option B and option C. IAM and infrastructure hardening live in security, not governance. The security perspective of the AWS CAF covers capabilities that help organizations achieve the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of cloud workloads. Identity and access management, including authentication, authorization, and privilege management, is a core security perspective capability. Infrastructure security, which covers network hardening, compute security, and perimeter controls, also falls within the security perspective. Portfolio management belongs to the governance perspective, which addresses risk management, compliance, and how the organization oversees its technology investments and business processes. Application modernization belongs to the platform perspective, which covers architecture patterns, infrastructure design, and how applications are built and deployed on cloud services. IT service delivery belongs to the operations perspective, which addresses how cloud services are operated and supported on a day-to-day basis, including service management, event handling, and infrastructure monitoring. Let us switch gears. Question 8. Make the distractors prove themselves. A company runs a database workload using Amazon RDS for MySQL. According to the AWS shared responsibility model, which two items are the customer's responsibility? Select 2. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are option B and option D. RDS hands engine patching and host OS entirely to AWS. Customers are responsible for configuring IAM policies that govern which identities can access the RDS instance, and for defining backup retention periods, automated backup windows, and snapshot strategies. These are access management and data configuration decisions that remain with the customer regardless of the managed service model. AWS manages patching of the RDS database engine software, including minor version upgrades, as part of the managed service offering. Replacing failed physical hardware is entirely AWS's responsibility as part of securing and maintaining the underlying cloud infrastructure. Applying security patches to the host operating system underlying RDS is also AWS's responsibility because RDS customers do not have access to the underlying host OS. Let us switch gears. Let's handle question 9. Contessa Core's security team wants to continuously monitor their AWS accounts for threats, such as EC2 instances communicating with known command and control servers, API calls originating from unexpected geographic locations, and cryptocurrency mining activity. They need a fully managed service that requires no agents, no infrastructure deployment, and no custom detection rules. Which AWS service provides this intelligent threat detection capability? Select 1. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option B. Agentless, ruleless, one-click enable, that is GuardDuty's signature. Amazon GuardDuty is a managed intelligent threat detection service that continuously analyzes AWS Cloud Trail Management events, VPC flow logs, DNS query logs, and other data sources using machine learning models and curated threat intelligence feeds to identify malicious activity and unauthorized behavior. It requires no agents to install, no infrastructure to manage, and no rules to configure. It activates with a single click and begins generating findings immediately. AWS WAF protects web applications from common application layer exploits, such as SQL injection and cross-site scripting at the HTTP request level. It does not perform broad account-level behavioral threat detection. AWS Shield Advanced provides managed DDoS protection for specific AWS resources, and includes enhanced detection and response support for volumetric and protocol-based attacks, but it does not detect threats such as compromised instances, unusual API usage patterns, or cryptocurrency mining. Amazon Inspector is a vulnerability management service that automatically scans EC2 instances and container images for software vulnerabilities and unintended network exposures. It assesses known CVEs and configuration weaknesses rather than performing real-time behavioral threat detection. Keep your focus here. Question 10. identify the business need first. Conteso Corporation is planning its migration to AWS and is adopting the Cloud Adoption Framework. The HR director and CIO are collaborating to lead one specific perspective that focuses on organizational change management, workforce readiness, training programs, and cultural transformation for cloud adoption. Which AWS CAF perspective are they leading? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option A. HR plus CIO together signals people, training, and culture. The people perspective within the AWS Cloud Adoption Framework focuses on the human and organizational dimensions of cloud adoption, including culture and change management, workforce training and skills development, resource management, and leadership alignment. HR directors and CIOs typically lead this perspective because it requires managing how people and organizational structures evolve during a cloud transformation. The governance perspective is led by chief transformation officers and focuses on audit, compliance, and risk governance. The business perspective is a CFO and CEO domain centered on financial alignment and business case development. The operations perspective is led by operations and SRE leaders focused on IT service delivery and infrastructure management. CAF Security owns IAM and infrastructure hardening. RDS transfers OS and engine patching to AWS entirely. Guard duty needs zero setup. People perspective covers training, culture, and org change. Came up twice. Keep your focus here. Let's check question 11. Quick check. A global enterprise is conducting an AWS Cloud Adoption Framework, CAF, readiness assessment. The team needs to evaluate organizational capabilities around workforce training, developing cloud skills, managing organizational change, and evolving the company culture toward a cloud-first operating model. Which CAF perspective covers these capabilities? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option D. Training, culture, org change, always the people perspective. The people perspective of the AWS Cloud Adoption Framework addresses the human side of cloud adoption, covering organizational change management, workforce training and skills development, leadership alignment, resource management, and cultural evolution. It helps organizations identify gaps in talent and organizational readiness for the cloud. The business perspective focuses on ensuring cloud investments align with business outcomes, covering portfolio management, financial management, and benefits realization. The governance perspective addresses audit and compliance, risk management, business process governance, and change governance. The operations perspective covers IT service delivery, application management, infrastructure management, database management, and event and incident response for ongoing cloud operations. Okay, question 12. Read this one twice. A financial services firm processes sensitive trading data subject to a regulatory mandate requiring dedicated hardware security modules, where the cloud provider has zero visibility into key material or cryptographic operations. The firm needs single-tenant HSMs under their exclusive control, without sharing the underlying hardware with other AWS customers. Which AWS service satisfies these requirements? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option A. KMS is multi-tenant, zero provider visibility requires Cloud HSM only. AWS Cloud HSM provides single-tenant hardware security modules dedicated exclusively to each customer. The data plane is end-to-end encrypted and not visible to AWS, meaning AWS has zero operational visibility into key material or cryptographic operations performed within the HSM. Customers manage their own HSM user credentials entirely outside of IAM, So AWS cannot retrieve or observe cryptographic operations under any circumstances, satisfying both the dedicated hardware and zero provider visibility requirements. AWS Key Management Service with customer-managed keys uses AWS Managed, multi-tenant HSM infrastructure. While AWS cannot retrieve plaintext key material from KMS, the underlying hardware is shared infrastructure managed and operated by AWS, which fails both the dedicated hardware and zero provider visibility requirements. AWS Secrets Manager is designed for storing and rotating application secrets, such as database credentials and API keys. It is not a hardware security module and provides no dedicated cryptographic hardware. AWS Certificate Manager Private Certificate Authority issues private SSL/TLS certificates within a PKI hierarchy, but does not provide dedicated HSMs for general cryptographic key management or the exclusive customer control demanded by the mandate. Let's slow down here. This one trips up a lot of people studying AWS key management. Imagine a trading firm hits a regulatory audit. The examiner asks, "Can your cloud provider see your key operations?" With KMS customer-managed keys, the answer is technically yes. AWS runs the underlying hardware, they own the machine even if you own the key policy. Cloud HSM is different. AWS ships you a dedicated hardware security module. One physical device, your firm only. No other AWS customers share it. AWS cannot peek inside, not even with a support ticket. That zero visibility guarantee is what strict regulators demand when they say dedicated hardware. KMS passes most audits. Cloud HSM passes the strictest ones. Okay. Question 13. Start with what the user needs. Contesso Media delivers video-on-demand content to millions of global viewers, and also operates a real-time content bidding API used by advertising partners worldwide. The architecture team needs to minimize latency when serving large cached video files to geographically dispersed viewers, and also provide consistent low-latency routing for the non-cacheable bidding API over TCP connections to the nearest AWS region. Which approach best addresses both requirements? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option A. Cache what changes rarely, accelerate what always hits origin. Amazon CloudFront is a content delivery network with globally distributed edge locations that cache content close to end users. For large static and streaming video files that do not change per request, CloudFront eliminates origin server round trips by serving cached copies from the nearest edge location, dramatically reducing latency for global viewers and lowering origin bandwidth costs. AWS Global Accelerator routes application traffic through the AWS Global Network backbone, using Anycast IP addresses, directing TCP and UDP connections to the nearest AWS region endpoint, with optimized network paths. For the non-cacheable bidding API, where every request requires origin processing and caching provides no benefit, Global Accelerator's network layer optimization delivers consistently lower latency than general internet routing. Reversing the two services would apply network layer acceleration to content that benefits more from edge caching, and push dynamic API requests through a CDN layer not designed for connection-level performance optimization. Using only CloudFront for the bidding API routes all API calls over general internet infrastructure for the last mile rather than AWS's private backbone. Using only Global Accelerator for video delivery sends all content requests to the origin, rather than serving from cache, creating unnecessary origin server load and higher latency for viewers far from the origin region. Let's break down when to use CloudFront versus Global Accelerator, because mixing them up is the trap. Imagine you run a streaming site and a live bidding API. The key question is, can this response be cached? For video files, yes, the same content goes to millions of people. CloudFront, AWS's content delivery network, caches those files at edge locations worldwide. A viewer in Tokyo gets the file from Tokyo, not your origin in Virginia, but your bidding API. Every request is unique. No two bids are the same. Caching helps nothing. Instead, Global Accelerator routes each API call over AWS's private backbone directly to the nearest region. That's the split. Cacheable content goes to CloudFront, dynamic requests go to Global Accelerator. Here we go. Question 14. Eliminate before you select. A security auditor reviewing Conteso Core's AWS account discovers that the root user has programmatic access keys enabled and has been used routinely for day-to-day administrative work for over a year. Which two immediate actions should the security team take to remediate the most critical root user security risks? Select 2. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are option B and option C. Rotating root keys leaves the risk alive. Delete them entirely. Deleting all programmatic access keys for the root user is a critical first action because the root user has unrestricted access to every AWS service and resource in the account with no IAM boundary whatsoever. A compromised root access key is the highest severity credential compromise possible. AWS security guidance is unambiguous. Root users should never have access keys. All programmatic access should use IAM identities instead. Enabling MFA on the root user account is equally urgent. MFA adds a required second factor that blocks unauthorized sign-in even if the root password is stolen or phished. AWS recommends a phishing-resistant FIDO2 device or passkey for root user MFA. Rotating root access keys on a schedule addresses the wrong problem entirely. The root user should have 0 access keys. Rotating them reduces exposure windows slightly, but leaves the fundamental risk in place and is not a recognized AWS best practice. Attaching an IAM policy to restrict the root user is not possible. IAM permission policies and permission boundaries have no effect on the root user. The root user always retains full access to all AWS resources regardless of any IAM policies that exist in the account. Only AWS Organizations service control policies applied to member accounts can limit certain root user actions. AWS Cloud Trail logging is a useful detective control for auditing root user activity, but it is a monitoring capability, not a remediation action. It detects misuse after the fact rather than eliminating the underlying security risk. Let's slow down here. This question has 3 words that completely change which answers are right. Imagine your master key, the one that opens every door in the building, no exceptions, stored outside where anyone can grab it. That's root user access keys. The question loads 3 words that change everything. Immediate means detective tools like CloudTrail are out. Logging detects a breach, it doesn't stop one. Remediate means rotating the keys doesn't qualify. You're keeping the risk alive, just with a fresher key. Most critical means IAM policies are out too. They literally have no effect on root. Delete the keys, add MFA. That's it. Here we go. Question 15. Map the qualifier to the answer. A data media runs a video transcoding platform on premises using a large Java monolithic application that handles scheduled overnight batch jobs. The platform meets current performance requirements. The operations team spends significant time managing server patching, hardware refreshes, and physical data center maintenance. Leadership wants to move to AWS as quickly as possible without modifying application code or architecture. Which migration strategy should a data media use? Select 1. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option B. No code changes plus fastest timeline equals lift and shift. Rehost, commonly called lift and shift, is the strategy of moving an application to AWS without modifying its code, architecture, or database. It is the fastest migration path and immediately eliminates hardware maintenance, data center overhead, and server patching responsibilities. The question explicitly requires no code or architecture changes, and the fastest possible migration timeline, which are the defining characteristics of rehost. Replatform involves making targeted optimizations such as replacing the video processing framework with a managed AWS service, which requires meaningful application changes. Refactor requires significant architectural changes to decompose the monolith into event-driven serverless functions, representing the highest effort migration strategy. Retain keeps the application on premises indefinitely and provides no migration benefit. Cloud HSM is the only zero-provider visibility HSM option. CloudFront caches statics. Global Accelerator routes dynamic traffic over the AWS backbone. Route access keys must be deleted entirely, never rotated. Next up, question 16. Look for the answer that fully satisfies it. Southridge Solutions is reviewing its AWS workloads to meet corporate ESG commitments. The sustainability team is identifying architectural practices that align with the AWS Well-Architected Framework sustainability pillar. Which TWA practices are explicitly aligned with the sustainability pillar? Select 2. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are option A and option C. Reserved instances cut cost, not carbon, wrong pillar entirely. The AWS Well-Architected Sustainability pillar focuses on minimizing the environmental impact of cloud workloads through efficient resource utilization and energy-conscious design decisions. Using AWS Graviton-based instances delivers better compute performance per watt than traditional x86 processors, directly reducing energy consumption for equivalent workloads. Selecting regions that rely more heavily on renewable energy sources aligns with the pillar's guidance to consider the energy source mix when choosing where to deploy workloads, reducing the carbon intensity of each compute hour. Enabling multi-factor authentication is a control belonging to the security pillar, which addresses how to protect systems and data from unauthorized access. Purchasing reserved instances is primarily a cost optimization decision that reduces billing costs based on a usage commitment, but does not directly reduce the energy consumed by the workload. Enabling S3 object lock is a data protection and compliance control that falls under the security pillar. Next up, question 17. Pick the complete answer. A new AWS account has just been created for a Datum Cores cloud transformation project. The cloud architect is establishing security baselines by following AWS security best practices for root user protection. Which 2 actions should be taken immediately after account creation? Select 2. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are option B and option D. Root cannot be deleted, and IAM policies cannot restrict it. Enabling multi-factor authentication on the root user is the single most critical immediate action after account creation. The root user has unrestricted access to all AWS services and billing information. If compromised, an attacker can delete all resources, modify account settings, and incur unlimited charges. MFA adds a required second factor that protects against password theft or phishing. Creating an IAM user with administrative permissions, or configuring access through AWS IAM Identity Center, is equally important because the root user should never be used for daily administrative work. Performing all tasks through an IAM identity ensures API activity is attributable to a specific user, allows permissions to be scoped precisely, and keeps root credentials stored securely and rarely used. Generating root user access keys is explicitly prohibited by AWS best practices. These keys cannot be adequately scoped and represent an unacceptable security risk. The root user cannot be deleted. It is a permanent account credential. IAM policies attached to the root user have no effect, because the root user always retains full account permissions regardless of any policy attached to it. Now, question 18. Solve the situation, not the keyword. Relic Cloud operates a global SaaS platform serving users across North America, Europe, and Asia. Most of the platform consists of static assets such as images, JavaScript bundles, and CSS files that change infrequently. The application also handles real-time API requests for user sessions that require consistently low network latency to origin servers. Which combination of AWS services addresses both requirements with the least operational overhead? Select 2. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are option A and option C. Static assets to the CDN cache, dynamic API to the backbone. Amazon CloudFront is the purpose-built content delivery network for serving static assets from over 400 edge locations worldwide, dramatically reducing latency for cacheable content by serving it from the location nearest to each user. CloudFront requires no infrastructure management and is the lowest overhead solution for global static asset delivery at scale. AWS Global Accelerator improves the performance of real-time, dynamic API requests by routing traffic from the nearest AWS edge location over the AWS private network backbone, rather than the unpredictable public internet, reducing latency and jitter for session-sensitive workloads without requiring application changes. Route 53 with weighted routing is a DNS-level traffic management tool that does not provide content caching or network path optimization. CloudFront can serve cached API responses but is not optimized as a proxy for uncacheable real-time session traffic. AWS Direct Connect is a dedicated private connection from an on-premises facility to AWS and does not serve as a global acceleration mechanism for distributed end users accessing a public application. Now, question 19. Read it carefully. Fourth Coffee is running a batch workload that processes employee scheduling reports overnight. The jobs take between 2 and 4 hours to complete, can be interrupted and automatically restarted from checkpoints without data loss, and run only during off-peak hours. The team wants to reduce EC2 compute costs as much as possible. Which EC2 purchasing option should they use? Select 1. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option C. Checkpoint and restart tolerance is Spot's permission slip. Spot instances provide discounts of up to 90% compared to on-demand pricing by using AWS spare compute capacity. They are ideal for workloads that can tolerate interruptions and support checkpoint and restart, exactly matching this nightly batch scheduling use case. When AWS needs the capacity back, it sends a 2-minute interruption notice, giving the application time to save state before termination. On-demand instances are more expensive and provide no cost advantage for this interruptible, off-peak workload. Standard reserved instances require a 1-year or 3-year commitment and deliver maximum savings for steady-state workloads that run continuously, not nightly batch jobs active only a few hours per day. EC2 dedicated hosts provide physical server isolation required for per-socket or per-core software licensing compliance, and are significantly more expensive, offering no cost benefit for this batch processing scenario. Let us keep moving. Question 20. Look for the constraint that matters. Litware e-commerce runs a public-facing storefront on AWS. The security team identifies 2 distinct attack vectors: a volumetric flood attack designed to exhaust the application's network capacity, and malicious HTTP requests containing SQL injection patterns submitted through the checkout form. Which combination of AWS services addresses both threats? Select 1. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option C. Network layer flood belongs to Shield. HTTP injection belongs to WAF. AWS Shield is specifically designed to detect and mitigate distributed denial of service attacks, including volumetric floods that attempt to exhaust network or transport layer capacity. Shield standard is automatically applied to all AWS customers at no additional charge. Shield Advanced provides enhanced protection with near real-time visibility and cost protection for higher-risk workloads. AWS WAF is a web application firewall that operates at the HTTP and HTTPS application layer, filtering incoming requests against configurable rule sets. AWS managed rules for AWS WAF include pre-built rule groups that block common exploits including SQL injection and cross-site scripting patterns before they reach the application. Using AWS WAF alone with rate-based rules can throttle request volume, but does not provide the network layer DDoS mitigation that Shield offers for large-scale volumetric attacks that exhaust capacity before reaching the application layer. Amazon Guard Duty analyzes account level and network telemetry to detect threats, but is not a traffic mitigation or request filtering service, and cannot block attacks in transit. AWS Shield does not inspect application layer request content, and cannot identify or block SQL injection patterns embedded in HTTP request bodies. 3 takeaways from this session. First, CAF People Perspective owns workforce training, culture change, and organizational transformation, not operations. Second, root access keys must be deleted entirely. IAM policies have no effect on the root user. Third, CloudFront caches static content at the edge. Global Accelerator routes dynamic requests over the AWS private backbone. Every question here rewards knowing which layer owns the problem. Security is not operations, root keys must be deleted not rotated, and sustainability is not cost optimization. That precision is what passes the CLF-C02.